The countdown in Santa Clara has started with pressure, not patience. George Kittle is already back in cleats after the Achilles injury, and he is aiming for Week 1. But the offense is not the only fire burning right now. The defense, after finishing last season with only 20 sacks, may be staring at a serious trade swing. Brock Purdy, still doubted by way too many people, just landed at the top of a real dark horse MVP conversation. And Brandon Aiyuk? That situation just got hot in a way every fan is going to feel. Hold on to this one. When George Kittle puts cleats back on after an Achilles injury, that is not some small behind-the-scenes note. That is life for a franchise that does not have time to waste a season. Subscribe because today 49ers Express is coming in with no breaks. Kittle went on the Rich Eisen show and he did not try to sell a miracle. No act, no fake promise. He dropped a, "We're getting there," in that classic Kittle way. But behind that line is an update that changes the whole mood of the fan base. He has put on cleats for the first time since the injury he suffered in the wildcard game against the Eagles. He has resumed heavier work, including box jumps, and the people around his recovery are fired up by what they are seeing. And this is where I get aggressive defending Kittle. Some players come back just to fill out a roster, and some players change the geometry of an offense just by stepping on the field. Kittle is not just a pass catcher. He blocks like he has a personal grudge against the defensive front. He sells routes. He holds safeties. He opens lanes for Christian McCaffrey. He gives Brock Purdy a safety valve with big game soul, and he still brings real force over the middle. So when he says the physical therapist connected to Dr. Neil Ella Trash, his own team, Heather, and the Niners trainers are all happy with his progress, the fan base has every right to lift its head. But the best part is the mindset. Kittle said he is a little ahead of schedule, and that his goal is to be out there with the boys in Week 1 against the Rams in Melbourne. But he also hit the right note. If he is cleared, and if it is smart for him to play. That is a veteran. That is leadership. That is not ego running over medicine. That is hunger controlled by responsibility. And remember who we are talking about. 5th round in 2017, heading into his 10th season. 595 catches, 8,008 yards, 52 touchdowns. 3rd in receiving yards in franchise history, 5th in receiving touchdowns. This is not just an injured player trying to come back. This could be the return of a real piece of the 49ers' offensive identity. If Kittle steps on that field healthy in the opener, the message to the NFC is simple. San Francisco's offense is not asking for permission. It is coming back for what got left on the table. Shift away from the recovery room, because this next part gets uncomfortable for any defense that takes itself seriously. 20 sacks last season. 20! For the San Francisco 49ers, that is not just a number, that is an alarm. A franchise trying to attack January with its chest out cannot live off a soft, uneven pass rush, waiting for Nick Bosa to perform miracles snap after snap while opposing quarterbacks pick targets like it is a no-contact walkthrough. Yes, there are reasons to believe improvement is coming. Bosa returning from injury changes the ceiling right away. Michael Williams coming back adds more size, more youth, more burst. Romello Height arriving through the draft gives them an interesting piece. But we need to talk like grown-ups here. Hope does not knock down Matthew Stafford. Hope does not scare Jalen Hurts. Hope does not wreck the timing of elite quarterbacks on 3rd down. If the Niners want to be treated like a serious contender, the edge rotation needs more bite. That is why Alex Highsmith's name grabs attention. Jason La Canfora put the 49ers among the teams interested, and Grant Cohn, on 49ers Collective, read that fit as much more realistic than dreaming about Max Crosby, Joey Bosa, or Myles Garrett. His idea is clean. Nick Bosa on one side in the wide 9, and on the other side, a stand-up outside linebacker who fits what this defense seems to be building. Cohn also said maybe a 3rd-round pick could put Highsmith in the conversation. That brings up the uncomfortable question Santa Clara has to ask. Would you rather hold on to a 3rd-rounder and try to find later on a player a lot of people project as a 5th or 6th-round talent, or use that capital on a 29-year-old edge rusher in his prime, coming off a strong year, ready to play right now? For me, if the price is really in that range, the answer should be aggressive. Call, negotiate, press, and test the Steelers all the way. Of course, Highsmith would not be cheap on the cap. Larry Krueger pointed out that his cap figure is $17.7 million. He also brought up what he heard from a Pittsburgh source. After Nate Herbig's extension, with TJ Watt obviously getting paid, Highsmith is a little unhappy. That does not mean an automatic move, but it does mean there may be an opening. Smart teams sniff out openings when the title window is still alive. The profile works too. Walk on at Charlotte, then all conference. That path is not glamour, That is built the hard way. That is a player who had to shoulder his way through doors, and that kind of story usually shows up in the way a guy plays. Highsmith is not old. He does not look like a late career piece. And for a defense that needs to get its fear, pressure, and depth back, more pass rush is never a luxury. There is another layer too. Grant Cohn also put Josh Sweat on the table, coming from the Cardinals, as a cheaper alternative if Max Crosby is too expensive or impossible. Sweat would make sense by role, by position, by fit. But there is division rivalry involved, there is cost, and there is real availability to measure. The bigger point is that the 49ers cannot pretend internal development solves everything. Bosa needs a partner, the defense needs teeth, and John Lynch needs to move like an executive for a team that is not rebuilding. It is hunting a Lombardi. Then comes Brock Purdy, once again carrying the kind of topic that separates people who actually watch football from people who just repeat labels. Dan Parr of NFL Media put Purdy at number 1 on his list of dark horse MVP candidates. This is not a list of obvious favorites, not a coronation, not a red carpet. It is that dangerous category. Names that are plausible, but still outside the center of the popular betting conversation. And you know why that bothers so many people? Because Purdy keeps entering these conversations through production, not marketing. The case against Purdy always tries to fit inside the same lazy box. They talk about the system. They talk about Shanahan. They talk about the players around him, as if a good quarterback is supposed to win despite his environment, instead of mastering the environment he has. But Parr touched on something critics love to treat as small: continuity. Purdy is going into his 5th straight year in the same offense, with Kyle Shanahan calling plays. For a smart quarterback, that is not cheap comfort. That is accumulated reading, adjustment, timing, trust, and detail. And we need to stop acting like Purdy has never been near this room before. In 2023, his first full season as the starter, he finished 4th in MVP voting. 4th! That was not sympathy. That was not national charity. That was not some cute story about the last pick in the draft. That was performance inside an offense that ran with precision, aggression, and efficiency. So when someone puts Purdy as the top dark horse now, the right reaction is not to laugh. It is to pay attention. What changes in 2026 is the arsenal. San Francisco went and got Mike Evans, a future Hall of Famer, added Christian Kirk, and still used pick 33 on Dejon Stribling, a receiver some analysts criticized as a reach, but a guy with size and speed who can shut mouths fast if he fits the plan. Then you add George Kittle, with a chance to come back early, Christian McCaffrey, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, and Jordan Watkins trying to take the next step. If Pearsall breaks out like Parr suggested, Shanahan will not just have options. He will have the kind of problem defenses hate solving. So the MVP conversation for Purdy is not built on fantasy. It is built on an equation this league knows and fears. Stable quarterback, elite play caller, deeper roster, offense with multiple answers, and a franchise under pressure to get back to the top. The point is not to say Purdy has already won anything in June. The point is that he has a real path to force the same critics to change their tone. And if this offense gets rolling early, buckle up, because the national narrative is going to have to swallow the name Brock Purdy without making a face. And just when the day already had enough fuel, Brandon Aiyuk turned the 49ers' summer into a public leverage drama. The receiver showed up on social media wearing a Washington Commanders hat and dropped a message full of shots, comparing the situation to a kid who brings the ball to the court, does not get picked, and threatens to take the ball home. Then he pushed the tone even harder, talking about people running from accountability, saying they know how he plays, and that nobody can say he is bad at football. Look, you can understand a frustrated player. You can understand hurt pride, money, role in the offense, a broken relationship. All of that is part of the NFL. But the San Francisco 49ers cannot be treated like an emotional hostage to Instagram posts. The franchise has Aiyuk's rights. It has a season to prepare for. It has a roster to organize. It has a window that cannot be hijacked by sideways messages every week. This is where the team has to be cold on the outside and firm on the inside. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network sees this as something that could drag through the summer. And his explanation shows why nobody is racing to settle this tomorrow. According to Rappaport, the 49ers would like to trade Aiyuk, probably to Washington, where Jaden Daniels is, and where there is familiarity with Adam Peters, who came from San Francisco. On the other side, the Commanders would rather sign Aiyuk without having to give up compensation. So one side wants value, the other side wants to wait. Everybody is frozen, staring at the table. And there is one brutal piece in this dispute. Rappaport said Aiyuk would not have guaranteed money coming because he forfeited it by not showing up for rehab. If that contract reading is the foundation of the Niners' posture, then the urgency shifts to the other side. San Francisco does not have to hand the player away for free just because the noise got loud. Noise is not currency. A post is not a pick. A hat from another team is not an exit clause. Still, we are not going to pretend this looks good for the locker room. It does not. Aiyuk missed the entire 2025 season in the middle of a dispute with the team, and now he is back at the center of the conversation with a message that went national. That wears on the fan base. It wears on the organization. It becomes fuel for everyone trying to paint Santa Clara as permanent chaos. But real contenders do not make decisions to please a feed. They make decisions based on value, roster, and championships. So I want to see the faithful in the comments with some courage. Would you hold Aiyuk until somebody pays compensation, even if the drama runs through training camp, or would you let him go just to clear the air? Because for me, if Washington wants the player, Washington needs to put something on the table. Simple. The 49ers cannot operate like a charity for any rival, especially when they still have the player's rights. If Aiyuk wants a new start, fine. But a new start in the NFL also goes through real business. And real business requires San Francisco to look exactly like what it should be. A big franchise, patient, tough, and hard to bend. In the end, this is the picture of a team that cannot live in almost. Kittle pushing for Week 1 brings the soul of the offense back to life. The search for pass rush shows the defense needs to recover fear. Purdy entering the dark horse MVP conversation exposes how much the league still underrates what he can do with stability and weapons. And Aiyuk reminds everyone that talent without control becomes expensive noise. The mission in Santa Clara is clear. Protect the window, act with force, and build a roster that reaches January with no excuses. Drop a like, subscribe, and stay right here, because this Niners season is about to catch fire.